What is our generation's contribution to the struggle for freedom? I was born a decade before South Africa's freedom from apartheid, and so I developed my consciousness at the same time as the national projects of transition, reconciliation, and transformation. That said, I do not recall the specific event of Nelson Mandela's release from prison. I know, it's a bit embarrassing. It's not the kind of thing we admit to in public as proud South Africans. What I do recall, however, was the feeling, the emotion that came with that protracted historical moment, triggered by his first steps beyond those dreaded gates. Suddenly, this mythical figure that we'd grown up hearing stories and singing songs about was transformed into the living embodiment of our journey away from oppression towards freedom. Indeed, those of us who bore witness to that historic moment are forever marked by a privilege we cannot deny: the first-hand knowledge that good does triumph over evil, that struggle is noble, that sacrifice pays off, and that ultimately, justice prevails. For this reason, the struggle for freedom has always been at the center of my consciousness. However, the challenge for my generation has been discovering our historical contribution in the context of what feels like the overshadowing and daunting legacy of those who came before us. This is made harder by the fact that we continue to experience forms of oppression, such as poverty and unemployment, in a time when we are meant to be free. And so what this has taught us is that freedom, the true insight of freedom, is that it is won over and over and over again, never once and for all. So what do we struggle for after political freedom? I was born and raised in Daveyton and eThwathwa, townships on the eastern end of Gauteng, South Africa's wealthiest province. And yet every morning at 6 a.m., our family would leave our community in the quest for a better life. My dad would leave for work first, and then my mother would travel with my brother and I, doing her very best to ensure that all remnants of our four-roomed house and the Patco bus that we had traveled on were dusted off before we walked through the pristine gates of our Catholic school. And so I learned from as early as 5, through such subtle acts as being over-clean, that to succeed in the world, I had to leave a lot of myself at the gate. Now, don't get me wrong. I am very conscious of the privileges that have been bestowed upon me as a function of that educational experience, including the privilege of being here on this very stage, presenting, reasoning, communicating in ways that are consistent with this very powerful platform. However, the act of leaving ourselves at the gate is about leaving parts of our identity at home in order to be accepted into the mainstream. It is about accepting that often covert communication that suggests to us that big chunks of our identity, our history, our culture, our values do not belong. You see, this project, this current project that we are living under, the project of inclusion, focuses so much of its energy on forcing people to assimilate, on domesticating certain identities, on changing people, changing the way they walk, talk, and eat, on devaluing people in order for them to gain entry. And so what I now understand is that this inclusion project is neither feasible nor desirable as a response to our bigger historical question, the question of our broken history. The solution exists, and that is far more elegant. People do not need to leave themselves at the gate in order to participate. The work that I do, the work of my organization, is about creating the space for people to bring the assets of their heritage to the economy. And we do this because we have come to understand a fundamental insight about what it means to participate in the world, and in particular, what the economy is. The economy is merely culture made manifest. The economy is people producing and consuming the things that they value. The economy is the people producing the things that they value. So where do our values come from? Our values come from our history. Our values come from our culture. Our values come from our identity. And so if we are serious about growing the economy and making it the source of sustenance, making it a genuine source of security for people, we need to accept that we need to broaden our concept of what constitutes value. Our belief is that true economic freedom can only come from new value creation. And this is not to discount the very valid and necessary struggles for reparations. But we have come to understand that distribution is only part of the solution. We concern ourselves with the other part, the creation of new value in the image of the historically disenfranchised. We work in these communities. We play outside the gate, in the very spaces that we once had to exit in order to access our social mobility, because we have come to understand those spaces as future global economic hubs. We do not see so-called poor communities as social service challenges. And so the work of my organization, the work that I have dedicated my life to, is the work of reimagining space, reimagining the spaces of the historically disenfranchised and understanding them as sources of new value, understanding them as economies. Put simply, we are in the business of building Wakandas, great African civilizations. And what I'm here to share today are some of the lessons of our journey, lessons that I hope will make us all stronger as we struggle for economic freedom. The first lesson is this: the biggest barrier to our economic freedom is our lack of self-worth. This is possibly the deepest scar of oppression. It is the reason why this shbelane, this amazing Tonga garment that I'm wearing, is not priced in a manner that reflects the premium product that it is. Indeed, we conduct research in communities across South Africa, and after having spoken to over 8,000 community members, we know that our communities struggle the most with tasks that involve valuing themselves. Asked what their needs are, our communities come alive. However, asked what their assets are, our communities struggle to articulate the good in themselves. Wakanda, economic freedom, relies on our communities valuing what they know. Because when we do not value what we know, we retreat from that most human act, our agency. And so before anyone else, before anyone else can value us, we need to recognize that it is our responsibility to value ourselves, our histories, our culture. It is our responsibility to value ourselves first. The second lesson is this: the magic is in the doing. I arrived to this work with a fancy master's degree and an extensive vocabulary in all things politics, philosophy, and economics. But I now understand that there is no amount of sloganeering, of critical thought, not even protest, that will get us there. Because as much as I speak of culture with a capital C, I also have to concede that in the work that we are doing, we have not yet found a way to build a solar farm that tilts in a unique way to the African sun. We are yet to design a hydroponic farm that demonstrates a deep African wisdom. And yet I live for this day. And I understand that with growing confidence, our communities will become the initiators of innovations that more truly reflect who we are. But right now, at ground zero, our task, our primary task, the revolution, is in taking high technology facilities that create lots of jobs and placing them in township, peri-urban, and rural communities. Wakanda, economic freedom, will most certainly begin to unfold, and quite gradually, but it cannot begin to do so if we do not get on with the work of doing. The third lesson is that development depends on entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are the future of development. If we are going to create new economic value, we need to appreciate that this depends on the emergence of a new and very large entrepreneurial class. From doing work in our communities, from working with small enterprises, what we understand is that our communities are extremely risk-averse. We have so little that we are afraid, and justifiably so, we are afraid to risk it all on an idea that may not succeed. And because of our history, we have very few examples of success around us. And so we do not understand that there is life after failure, and that in fact, failure is a prerequisite for success. And so herein lies a special task for the African middle class, both here at home and in the diaspora. Many of us serve as part of teams knowing that we are amongst the most talented within those teams and established organizations. Yet we are also afraid to trust what we know to create new value outside of that establishment. And so we are faced with a choice. We are either going to remain faithful employees, aiding the extraction and export of value to other communities, or we are going to create new and lasting value for our communities. Wakanda, economic freedom, depends on our entrepreneurial will. The fourth lesson is that infrastructure is absolutely critical to unlocking Africa's entrepreneurial talent. I'll use an example that is close to what I do as an entrepreneur in the energy and development sectors. Sub-Saharan Africa has a total installed electrical capacity of 96 gigawatts. In comparison, China has an installed electrical capacity of 1,500 gigawatts. The United States of America with a third of our population, has 1,000 gigawatts of power. Simple maths tells us that we have less than 10% of the power that we need. And so while fire may keep us warm, and fire may help us cook our food, it's not going to power up a laptop and connect us to the internet. And so if we are serious about unlocking the talents of young African people in a manner that is aligned with the unfolding global future, we have to invest in infrastructure. And this requires collaboration between African governments and African businesses. As entrepreneurs, our task is a simple one. We need to solve for the user pays challenge. We need to think more like Google, understanding that our users cannot afford to pay for the services that they need. And so rather than designing simple products, our function is to create integrated solutions. Wakanda, economic freedom, is to be built for us, but most importantly, by us. The final lesson is this: capital matters. One of the biggest shifts in the way that we do our work has been in our understanding of the power of capital. To achieve scale and impact, capital matters. It also matters that those who control capital, whether as asset managers, bankers, grant makers, social investors, it matters that they reorient the way that they think about capital. Because again, we are faced with a choice. We can either deploy infrastructure as a donation, or we can deploy it as an investment. When deployed as an investment, we challenge ourselves to ensure that we deliver sustained social change in tandem with financial returns. And the financial returns enable us to allow continuous reinvestment in the very communities that were never designed to be investment destinations. Wakanda, economic freedom, requires us to change the way we think about capital. It requires us to understand that culture is capital. Culture is capital. And importantly, development is not a tick box exercise to appease our guilt. Development is an investment opportunity. And so to conclude, if Oprah herself were asking me what I now know to be true, this is what I would say. I would say that the reemergence of great African civilizations is the ultimate goal of our journey away from oppression towards freedom. I would say that I know that it is the calling of my generation to fight hard and win the struggle for economic freedom. I would say that I know in my heart of hearts that this is a struggle that we can and will win in our lifetimes. Thank you very much.